Who is this guy? How did the most optimistic, hopeful character in the galaxy turn into this hermit who says it's time for the Jedi to end? I read that and I said, what? I mean, that's not what a Jedi does.
As I reflect on the movie, not only have I found that I don't like it, I'm a bit more in the extreme opposite direction. I actually kind of hate it.
The way I approached how we would go about making Episode 7 wasn't any different than what we would do with any large tentpole movie today.
There was a period, a very brief period of time, when Star Wars was just a series of well-liked blockbusters. And now it's not special anymore.
I told Ryan, I fundamentally disagree with virtually everything you've decided about my character.
Hasbro is officially producing a Vice Admiral Gender Studies Holdo action figure. The fact that they're making this toy boggles my mind. Who really asked for this character? She's essentially Space Anita Sarkeesian. Nobody wants her on Earth. Nobody wants her in outer space.
This movie took everything that you like about Star Wars, that you love about Star Wars, that you thought you knew about Star Wars, and it on it. And on it again, and then it sets it on fire, and then it on it again.
It just fills me up with so much rage inside of my body that it starts lighting my brain cells on fire.
Fuck this movie. This movie and everyone in it.
I'm pissed off! You know, and I don't get pissed off about movies very often.
Well, is this the spark that will light the fire that will burn the Star Wars franchise to the ground? Or is this just business as usual? I mean, let's face it, it's nothing new for Star Wars fans to be freaking out. But you know, I was a teenager back when The Phantom Menace came out, and I saw the reaction to that, how it went from like initially a stunned silence to then just pure rage, and now has kind of softened with a younger generation that's grew up with the prequels. But even back then, during some of the most hate-filled days for the prequels, the feeling amongst the fans was not the same as the feeling amongst the fans now for The Last Jedi. This one feels different to me. And for reasons that I will explain in this video, I think this might actually be the one that deals the death blow to Star Wars as the mega franchise that it is. I believe we will look back on The Last Jedi as the one that changed Star Wars from something special to just another movie franchise. Now, as this is a very long video, I'm going to put timestamps in the description and I'll pin them in the comments as well. So if at any point you get bored with what I'm saying, don't leave. You can just click on a topic that's more interesting to you. All right, let's get into it. A problem that this new trilogy doesn't seem to understand is something that was an issue in The Force Awakens and has continued to be a problem for The Last Jedi, and it is a failure to set the stage for the wider universe. You see, in the original trilogy, it was not needed to set the stage as to what's happening with the Empire and the Republic because it was a totally new universe that we were thrown into, so we explored it through the eyes of Luke as this larger galaxy-wide war unfolded towards us. We didn't need to know exactly who the Emperor was or what happened to the Old Republic in order to understand what was going on, because it was a whole new universe. It was a blank slate. But this new trilogy, this is a universe that we already know very well. We all assumed that there would be a new Republic, a new Jedi under Luke, and that the remnants of the Empire were pushed to the fringes of the galaxy. But instead, we were introduced to a universe that was almost identical to the one in A New Hope, an evil empire dominating space with only a small band of rebels fighting back. It's barely even explained what the difference is between the New Republic and the Resistance. We never even see the New Republic at all. How did the First Order rise without any opposition from the New Republic? Why is this small resistance group the only ones standing up to the First Order? And why is there not a new Jedi Order? You see, if this was a new universe, they wouldn't need to explain any of these things. But it's not. It's an extension of a universe we all know very well. So we need to know the answers to these things. And the movie doesn't bother to answer them, even in the opening crawl. I mean, that's what it's there for, guys. It's there to catch you up on what happened previously. But they didn't even do that. Content, rather, with leaving all of that to be explained by the expanded universe. Yeah, they'll just fill in all the gaps. So what, we have to read like 3 books to understand what's happening in the universe? Great. Homework. That's what we all want when we go to see a movie, right? No, look, I've said this before and I'll say it again. Movies must be self-contained. The expanded universe stuff should be there to enrich the lore that is already in the movies. It's not supposed to be used to fill in massive gaps in the movie's lore. If I have to do research outside of the movie to understand the universe, then the movie failed. And sadly, The Last Jedi repeats the same mistake that The Force Awakens did. It jumps from Starkiller Base hitting all the New Republic worlds and then being destroyed itself to now 99% of the galaxy is under First Order rule. How? How did that happen? I mean, I understand that the New Republic would have been weakened after their core worlds had been hit, but what about all the other hundreds, if not thousands of worlds that make up this New Republic? Surely it's not just these planets. And I also understand that the Republic fleet was gathered around those core planets, so they got destroyed as well. But don't all the other planets in the New Republic have fleets of their own? Wouldn't the fact that the First Order just blew up their capital galvanize the rest of the galaxy together to fight the First Order? Apparently not. That would be like if after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, America just immediately surrendered to Japan. It just wouldn't make any sense. And how exactly did the First Order gather enough strength to overrun the galaxy after Starkiller Base was destroyed? I realize that they struck a blow against the New Republic, but they also took a blow too. I mean, how much resources and money went up in flames when that base exploded? You know, the Empire could continue after losing a Death Star because they had the resources of an entire galaxy to draw on, but the First Order is just this small pocket of space. How do they have the resources to take a hit like that? You know, one American aircraft carrier costs about $13 billion. That's a lot of money sinking to the bottom of the ocean if just one of those things goes down. But not only has the First Order managed to bounce back after losing Starkiller Base, despite only having the resources of a small pocket of space, but they've gone on to conquer 99% of the galaxy between movies.
The First Order will control all the major systems within weeks.
How? Does Snoke poop diamonds? Yeah, I don't care how strong you are in the dark side. If you use all of your metal to build Starkiller Base, not to mention all of the manpower that was there, and then it all goes up in flames, I don't think you're going to be in a position to conquer anything for quite a long time. It doesn't matter how powerful you are with the Force. The Force doesn't pay the bills. And don't tell me that money doesn't matter in the Star Wars universe, because this whole thing got started because of space taxes. The entire direction of the galaxy was changed because Qui-Gon couldn't afford a ship part. But the question of how the Resistance victory at the end of The Force Awakens was turned into a defeat is kind of half answered in this deleted scene.
So you blew up Starkiller Base. Yeah. Rey beat Kylo, the Resistance got the map. You won, right? Why doesn't this feel like winning?
We came out of hiding to attack Starkiller. It didn't take long for the First Order to find our base. Now we gotta regroup and go back at them.
So that ticks the box as to why the Resistance has fallen on hard times, but not as to how the First Order recovered from the loss of Starkiller Base, or why the remainder of the New Republic can't scrape together a fleet to oppose the First Order with. So effectively, the whole existence of this New Republic is just swept out of the Star Wars story, almost as if it was an inconvenient plot point. Are you kidding me? The New Republic was what the rebels in the original trilogy spent 3 movies fighting for. It was the result of all of their sacrifice, all of their hard work, and we never even got to see it. The only thing we get is one shot. Just one shot, and you might not even know that that's apparently the capital of the New Republic. But that's all you get, guys. 3 movies, and that's all you get. Now, in the Expanded Universe books, they do explain that the New Republic, after defeating the last of the Empire, at the Battle of Jakku, the aftermath of which we see Rey scavenging in The Force Awakens, the New Republic, under the leadership of Mon Mothma, brought in a policy of universal disarmament, effectively ending the concept of a galaxy-spanning military, returning to the days of the Old Republic, which never actually had a military until, of course, Palpatine made one. So this would explain why the only small fleet the Republic had was just gathered around the core worlds to protect the government headquarters, but it still leaves me with my previous questions as to why the rest of the New Republic didn't jump into the fight, and I think we are all seeing the giant lightsaber-wielding elephant in the room. The Old Republic didn't have an army before Palpatine because they had the Jedi Order policing the galaxy. The New Republic didn't have a new Jedi Order yet. I mean, sure, Luke had trained a couple of other students with Kylo, but clearly he didn't have enough Jedi there to police the entire galaxy with a whole new Jedi Order. So why the hell would the New Republic disarm if they didn't have the Jedi Order to step into the role of protecting the Republic? It seems incredibly stupid. They were just begging for some group like the First Order to rise from the ashes. Maybe that's why Luke gave up on the fight, because the New Republic seems to be just as incompetent as the old one. Speaking of which...
What took you so long?
I'm sorry, what?
I've been stuck on this planet since I crash landed here like a decade ago. I've been living off of grass and rainwater. I don't even want to tell you what I've been wiping with. For crying out loud, I left a map of my exact location. Why didn't anyone come looking for me?
We all thought you went into exile.
Exile? No. I just wanted to get away for a few weeks. Thought this would be a cool place to go visit.
Everyone thought you blamed yourself for what Kylo Ren did.
Well, that doesn't make sense. If anyone's to blame, it's my sister for raising a spoiled brat. Besides, that doesn't even sound like me. I'm the guy that confronted Vader. Twice. If I felt responsible for Kylo Ren, wouldn't I try to stop him rather than go run and hide? You know what? I can leave now and that's all that matters. So let's just go and stop Kylo Ren before he does something crazy like rebuild the Empire and blow up some planets or kill off a national treasure.
The biggest question I had regarding Luke after The Force Awakens was, why did he run away and hide on an island for 30 years and do nothing as the universe fell back into darkness? That is so unlike the Luke that we know from the original trilogies that it boggles the mind. Luke is the guy who abandoned his own Jedi training because he couldn't stand knowing that his friends were in danger. A person like that doesn't then turn around and abandon his friends in their darkest hour. In fact, at this point, they wouldn't have been just his friends, they were literally his family. So I was hoping they had a real good explanation as to why Luke was hiding on that island, otherwise he's going to look like a complete and total coward. But sadly, the explanation they give is basically the same as what we already heard in The Force Awakens. And it didn't make any sense then either.
He was training a new generation of Jedi. One boy, an apprentice, turned against him, destroyed it all. Luke felt responsible. He just walked away from everything.
Look, there's nothing wrong with changing a character, especially after a 30-year period is supposed to have passed. People do change over time, sometimes drastically. This does happen. So it's not a problem for Luke to change drastically. It's not even a problem for him to change into what he has. The problem is that this change needs to be earned. And The Last Jedi doesn't earn it. What do I mean by that? Well, take for example Vader's character change from villain to hero in the original trilogy. It was certainly a very, very drastic change. But when he makes that moves and turns to the good side, saving his son Luke, it wasn't a jarring change. It didn't feel wrong watching it because we had seen his character evolve over the course of the movies. We had gotten to learn more about his background so that when he makes that change, it makes sense. We didn't know the whole history of his life and we didn't need to, but we had enough to justify him changing. So when it comes to Luke just saying, yeah, he blamed himself for Ben turning to the dark side, so he just gave up, it's not enough for a change this drastic. Luke is the guy who is basically willing to let himself be blown up inside the second Death Star.
Soon I'll be dead, and you with me.
all because he saw just a little spark of goodness inside Vader. That was all it took. Just a tiny speck of hope for Luke was worth dying for. That's the kind of guy that Luke was. And wouldn't there have been more hope in Ben Solo returning to the good side? After all, he'd only just started down the dark path while Vader had been on it for decades at that point. Even Rey mentions this to Luke.
Yes, the most hated man in the galaxy, but you saw there was conflict inside him. You believed that he wasn't gone, that he could be turned.
And I became a legend.
Yeah, nice dodge there, Luke, but I really want to know the reason why. Why did one setback cause you to throw in the towel? Why didn't you extend to Ben the same kind of hope that you extended to Vader? Why did just one setback cause you to completely throw in the towel? Granted, it was a big setback, but still, one setback. A good symbol for how they just completely disregarded Luke's character is him throwing away his lightsaber. That was his father's lightsaber. That is the lightsaber that his father was wielding during his duel with Obi-Wan on Mustafar when he got crippled. It's the lightsaber that Obi-Wan picked up and took and kept with him, carrying it for years on Tatooine as he watched Luke growing up from a distance, waiting for the time when he could finally pass it on to Luke, for Luke to take on the mantle of his father, and for Obi-Wan to hopefully correct the wrongs that he made in training his father. This is the lightsaber that Luke was holding when he first tapped into the Force on the Millennium Falcon. The lightsaber he was holding when he fought his father for the first time, when he lost his hand. And now, after all this time, it has called with the Force to Rey, presumably so that Rey can return it to Luke. Almost like a cosmic gesture of the Force reaching out to Luke, finally, to bring him back to the light, to bring him back to the fight, back to the Force, back to his role as the Master Jedi, and... Oh, God. You know, we spent the whole last movie getting that lightsaber to him, and that's what happens. Mark Hamill said that he imagined his own backstory in which Luke got married and maybe had a son, and then one day his son accidentally found his lightsaber, switched it on, and skewered himself. Why didn't they include that in the movie? That really would have helped. Maybe if they also added in something that shortly after that his wife died, maybe in a freak accident, and then he did the training with Kylo Ren, and that's when everything went wrong there. So at that point, he's like, okay, I've had enough. Like, I mean, I could buy it at that point because everyone's got a breaking point, but just one mistake with Ben Solo and that's it? Come on.
He said you're coming back with us.
How did you find me?
Through the map that you left.
You think that I came to the most unfindable place in the galaxy for no reason at all?
No, we think you came to this island to look for the original Jedi Temple because that's what Han Solo said you came here to do. Do you not even remember that yourself? Are we even going to get into that?
I will never train another generation of Jedi. I came to this island to die.
Then why did you leave everyone a map? In fact, you did a suicide mission in the Return of the Jedi. If you wanted to die anyway, why didn't you just go on a suicide mission to take out Snoke and Kylo? I mean, what do you got to lose? At least then you go down swinging, not like a bitch.
You've closed yourself off from the Force.
Yeah, why is that exactly? I mean, I get that he's quit being a Jedi, but even if he has quit being a Jedi, wouldn't you still want to keep using the Force? I mean, it'd be pretty useful just for your day-to-day life. I mean, you wouldn't have to fish using a giant spear that would be really inefficient at getting fish. You could just pluck them out of the water using the Force.
It's time for the Jedi to end.
And this is the most important question. Why has he given up being a Jedi? He does partially answer this.
3 lessons. I will teach you the ways of the Jedi and why they need to end.
Even though he only actually teaches her 2 lessons because the 3rd lesson got cut out and is in a deleted scene somewhere. But don't worry, we'll cover that as well. But come on, you got him saying 3 lessons and he only teaches 2 in the movie. Like, why did you cut out the 3rd lesson? To make more time for him to suckle off an alien tit? Is that really so important that we're going to keep that in, but we're going to lose Jedi training, the 3rd of the 3 lessons? I mean, alien boob, Jedi training. Alien boob, Jedi training. Well, Well, the choice is clear, isn't it? So long, Luke Skywalker, teaching the next generation of Jedi some important lessons. Instead, we've got to go and suck off an alien boob for a while. I mean, I know that Luke grew up on the whole blue milk as a moisture farmer, but let's just say I don't want to know what other types of moisture he might have been farming from this creature. So his first reason as to why the Jedi need to end is because they don't have a monopoly on the Force, because whether the Jedi exist or not, the Force is still there.
That Force does not belong to the Jedi. To say that if the Jedi die, the light dies is vanity. Can you feel that?
And that's all well and good, but the Jedi are not the guardians of the Force. They're supposed to be the guardians of peace and justice in the galaxy.
For over 1,000 generations, the Jedi Knights were the guardians of peace and justice in the Old Republic.
And the Force helps them to accomplish that task.
And the Force is what gives the Jedi his power.
But that task cannot be accomplished by the Force without the Jedi. And without somebody wielding the Force for good, the universe is going to fall victim to darkness. Kinda like exactly what happened as soon as Luke quit being a Jedi. This is like someone saying, goodness still exists in the world, regardless of whether or not there's cops, so we don't need any cops at all. Well, no, that's incredibly stupid. I mean, it's true that goodness would still exist in the world independent of a police force. I mean, the police aren't even always that good, but if you get rid of the police, there's going to be a hell of a lot more evil in the world. Things would turn Mad Max very quickly because there's nothing to counter it. If the Sith no longer existed, then Luke could make this argument that we don't need the Jedi anymore, but that's simply not the case. His second lesson is that the universe would be better off without the Jedi, because they always fail.
If you strip away the myth and look at their deeds, the legacy of the Jedi is failure.
And you know what? He might actually be kind of right about that. I mean, the arrogance and the dogmatic inflexibility of the Jedi of old did allow Palpatine to rise to power, and considering what a crappy job that Luke has done since the victory over the Empire, yeah, he might be right. You know, there is that old quote, say what you will about Mussolini, but at least he made the trains run on time. The idea of the quote being that while it sucked to live under fascism, at least stuff got done. Everybody had a job and everything worked. There wasn't a lot of freedom to go around, but the argument is that an efficient tyranny is preferable to an inefficient freedom. Now, in real life, I definitely would not agree with that, but when it comes to the Star Wars universe, just imagine for a minute that you lived in the Star Wars universe. Now, if you're living under Republic rule, you are much less likely to be enslaved and build a giant Death Star if you're a Wookiee, but you might be enslaved as a child if you're a human, and the apparently benevolent Jedi don't really care.
Have you come to free us?
No, I'm afraid not.
Even in the new era, Finn and Rose don't really care about freeing child slaves either. They care about freeing animals, but not the actual kids who were enslaved to look after the animals. I mean, that's pretty messed up.
Go. Now it's worth it.
So I don't know if living under a Republic government would be any more compassionate than living under the Empire, it seems. And I suppose under First Order rule, you might be stolen as a child and raised up to be a stormtrooper, but then under the Old Republic, you might also be taken as a child and raised to be a Jedi. Although I would imagine the First Order discipline is much more harsh, so they're not total equivalents. But it's still kids being separated from their parents in both governments. And yes, I know, you could have your planet blown up under the Empire, but let's be honest, that only happened once, okay, twice, okay, well, a number of times if you count the individual planets. But you know what? Under the Empire, surprisingly, each planet was allowed semi-independence, just as long as they didn't defy imperial orders.
How will the Emperor maintain control without the bureaucracy?
The regional governors now have direct control over their territories.
The regional governors, which means the local governments could still govern their planets pretty much how they wanted. If they were under Empire rule, they just couldn't go against the Emperor. Whereas in the Old Republic, a bunch of systems wanted to leave, and the Republic launched the biggest galactic war ever to stop them from leaving. That actually wouldn't have happened under the Empire, because each of those systems already had semi-sovereignty, something that apparently the systems under the Old Republic rule didn't have. And you know, I also get the impression that for the average man on the street, who couldn't really care less about the politics of this universe or the rebellion versus the Empire, I kind of get the feeling that the Empire would not really bother you just as long as you didn't bother it. But what you get in return is a government that can actually get things done. The Republic could barely figure out taxation of trade routes without the government almost collapsing and plunging the galaxy into universal war. Yet in the Empire, Palpatine gives an order, it gets done. The trains run on time. And considering that the conditions are fairly similar under both governments, wouldn't you rather be ruled by a competent devil than an incompetent angel? I know I certainly would if I lived in the Star Wars universe. So I think I actually have to agree with Luke on this one. The galaxy probably would be better off if the Jedi didn't exist and Palpatine was still running the galaxy. I think this deleted scene is actually great. It's a little bit confused about what it's trying to say, but it's still great. And why they deleted the third of Luke's 3 lessons, but still kept in the space casino, and don't worry, we'll get there as well, it's beyond me. But the lesson starts like this.
There's a tribe from a neighboring island. They come here once a month to raid and plunder the caretaker's village.
Come on, we've got to stop them.
Do you know what a true Jedi Knight would do right now? Nothing.
This is not a lesson. They're going to get hurt. We have to help.
If you meet that raiding party with force, they'll be back next month in greater numbers and with greater violence. Will you be here next month? That burn inside you, that anger thinking what the raiders are going to do, the books in the Jedi library say ignore that. Only act when you can maintain balance.
This is actually very pragmatic advice. When I lived in a big city on the proverbial bad side of town, it wasn't so much the whole neighborhood that was bad. There was just one street in particular where all the drug dealers would hang out, all the hookers would line up, and everybody in the area knew that if you want to steer clear of trouble, you just avoid that one street. But I always kind of wondered, since it was common knowledge what goes on in that street, I thought, why don't the cops ever do a raid on that street and search everyone? I'm sure they'd find loads of drugs and stuff like that to arrest people for. Then one day I got into a conversation with a cop and I asked him exactly that. And he said the reason they don't do that is because since it's common knowledge what goes on there, law-abiding people are able to just avoid that street and not have to cross paths with the criminal element. But if they do a raid in that street, all of the drug dealers and the hookers will scatter to lots of different places all over the area, causing lots of problems for regular people. So the cops allowed a certain amount of leeway in that street, because at least then it keeps the crime contained to that just one area. There's a certain wisdom in that. The same kind of wisdom that Luke is giving to Rey right now. He's saying don't intervene unless you can maintain balance afterwards. And it's very pragmatic advice. But there's another element to this. He is effectively saying to Rey the same thing that Yoda said to him when he was on Dagobah and wanted to leave to go and save his friends.
You must not go.
But Han and Leia will die if I don't.
Patience.
And sacrifice Han and Leia.
If you honor what they fight for, yes.
Yoda was telling him to focus on the bigger picture. The main fight that was to be fought was against the Emperor. He wanted to get him ready for that. And if that means that Han and Leia have to suffer, then so be it. But of course, Luke being Luke, he couldn't stand the thought of his friends suffering and he had to rush off to confront Vader. But I really like the idea that now Luke, he's a bit older, he's a bit more mature, he's seen the wisdom in what Yoda was saying back then, and he's effectively saying the same thing to Rey. Sometimes you have to allow a little bad stuff to go on for the greater good. But Rey makes the same choice that we saw Luke make in Empire Strikes Back, and she rushes off to save the day, only to find out that Luke was actually trolling her.
Was this a joke?
Sorry, I didn't think you just ran so fast.
I thought they were in danger. I was trying to do something.
Now this could be a great moment where he explains to her the need to look at the bigger picture, but instead they ruin it with him saying this.
And that's what the Resistance needs, not some old failed husk of a religion. Do you understand now?
So this apparently is his final lesson as to why the Jedi need to end, because the brave actions of ordinary people is all the rebellion needs. Luke, or more accurately, Rian Johnson, in case you haven't noticed, the Rebellion do need Jedi helping them because they suck balls. And not only do they suck balls, the First Order has Snoke and Kylo Ren wielding the dark side. So you need Jedi wielding the light side to balance it out. Otherwise, they don't stand a chance. If you're fighting a war and your enemy builds a new type of tank that's better than anything you have, you don't just say, well, you know, we've got brave soldiers, that's all we need. No, you try to build tanks just as good, maybe better, than the ones your enemies have, because you have to be at least on a level playing field to your enemies. If the First Order have Sith, the Rebellion needs Jedi. And ordinary people, no matter how brave they might be, is not enough. None of these reasons that Luke gives seem very valid as to why he would just give up, and no one knows that more than Mark Hamill himself.
In 7, you discovered Luke obviously is a hermit on this island, that there's so much unsaid about where he's been and what he's done. I said to Ryan, I said, Jedis don't give up. I mean, even if he had a problem, he would maybe take a year to try and regroup. But if he made a mistake, he would try and right that wrong. So right there, we had a fundamental difference. But it's not my story anymore. It's somebody else's story. And Ryan needed me to be a certain way to make the ending effective. That's the crux of my problem. Luke would never say that. I'm sorry. Well, in this version, see, I'm talking about the George Lucas Star Wars. This is the next generation of Star Wars. So I almost had to think of Luke as another character. Maybe he's Jake Skywalker. He's not my Luke Skywalker, but I had to do what Ryan wanted me to do because it serves the story well. But listen, I still haven't accepted it completely, but it's only a movie. I hope people like it. I hope they don't get upset.
And it's strange because there does seem to be a good explanation for Luke quitting on the Jedi already in the story. It's right there in the story already. All they had to do was just reach down and pick it up.
Darkness rises and light to meet it. I warned my young apprentice that as he grew stronger, his equal in the light would rise.
Balance. Powerful light, powerful darkness.
So if the light and the dark side are both connected, does that mean that if the Jedi disappear eventually, so will the Sith? Because if so, that would be a very good reason for why Luke is doing what he's doing. If he is determined to put a stop to this never-ending cycle of light defeating the darkness, and then the darkness defeating the light, and then the light defeating the darkness again, and on and on and on and on, if that's his idea to end all of that forever, then good plan. I mean, they already had the elements in the story to do that. He was already willing to burn down the Jedi tree thing. It fits in with the theme of the movie of let the past die, kill it if you have to. And all it would have taken is just one line of dialogue from Luke saying, once the Jedi are gone, the Sith will fade away too, and then it will finally be over. But they didn't do it. It's the road not taken. I mean, that's really the problem with this movie. The road not taken. There's so many things they could have done with Luke. There's so many directions they could have gone. Like, here's just a really simple one. Why didn't Leia show up on the island to help Luke? If the idea was to get Luke off his island and to come join the rebellion again, why didn't Leia go to the island with Rey to convince him to come back? She'd have a lot more success at getting Luke back in touch with his roots again than some chick that Luke has never even met before. Yeah, I know, Chewie and R2 are there as well. But come on, Leia. That really would have worked well. And don't tell me that Leia couldn't have gone there because there was no one else to run the rebellion. She seems to be pretty confident with Vice Admiral Gender Studies. She could have run things while Leia does the much more important work of going and getting Luke and bringing him back to the fight. Speaking of which,